appreciate it. I want to say good morning to Sean Spicer, Communications Director for the Republican National Committee. Sean, it's good to see you today.
Welcome back, Thomas. It's nice to have you back on the air.
We're stretching our muscles now after the Olympics. But, Sean, let's talk about who Ryan is. The Democrats are already having a field day with his record. Take a look at this new ad that the Obama camp put out in Florida today ahead of the Romney visit there.
Medicare is a boon for senior citizens who without that would choose between food and going to a doctor.
Those kind of cuts are going to be incredibly painful to the working class person, and because we're going to be the ones that are going to be paying for it.
So, Sean, as you know, Romney's strongest demographics, one of them is seniors, with 3 of the oldest voting blocks coming out of the states of Florida, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. Can Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan assure Florida's seniors that he won't change Medicare as we know it?
Absolutely. I mean, here are the facts. One on the politics and one on the substance. Substance first. The President of the United States, Medicare goes bankrupt in 2024. That is a fact. It's out by the Social Security trustees. This President has not put forward a plan to do anything. He will let it go bankrupt under the current thing. His budget doesn't do anything to address it. Second, when he crafted Obamacare, he took $700 billion out of the Medicare fund and put it into the Obamacare plan to fund that. So the only one who has cut Medicare by $700 billion is the President and the Vice President. The only one without a plan to save it and protect it is the President. I think we're actually going to do very, very well on this, both substantively and politically. On the political front, when you look at 2010, both during that general election and then in the subsequent special elections, our candidates that went out there and who made an articulate case as to what our plan was to ensure that it is preserved and protected for seniors to come beyond 2024 were widely elected. So I think politically, people in this country understand that we have problems, and they want politicians to go out there and put real solutions in place, which is exactly what Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan will do.
All right, so Sean, Ryan is well known in the media, not so much across the country just yet. He has served in Washington as we look over his record for the last 14 years. Nearly all of his experience is inside the Beltway. Here's what he said at a campaign rally over the weekend. Take a listen.
We feel, as your fellow citizens, that we owe you a choice of 2 futures. We can either stay on the current path that we are on, a nation in debt, a nation in doubt, a nation in despair, a nation with high unemployment, where we're giving our children a diminished future, or we can change this thing and get this country back on the right track.
All right, so Sean, for us that know and have been covering him for a long time, we know that he's been one of the major conductors of the train in Washington, D.C. So for the people around the country that are getting to learn who Congressman Ryan is, it seems as if he's trying to distance himself from the work that he's already done in Washington, D.C. The polls show that Republicans in Washington are far less popular than the Democrats. So how does he discount his own record in the introduction that he's trying to make to those across the country, independents especially, that are just getting tuned into the election?
Well, I think I would actually use the words of President Obama, who said Paul Ryan is a serious man who brings serious solutions to the problems. Paul has spent the last 14 years talking about budget deficits, talking about how to create economic growth, reforming the tax code. There is no one, in the Republican Party or in the Democratic Party in Washington that wouldn't admit that Paul Ryan has been someone who has been fighting for reform and changes his entire 14 years here. So I think when you combine that ticket, Mitt Romney's business experience, his experience as an executive, whether it was running and saving the Olympics or his time as governor, and Congressman Ryan's time sort of leading the charge in Washington for tax reform, for economic growth policies, for budget discipline, and trying to get us back on a path to balance, you have an amazing 1-2 team that can get this country moving again. And frankly, I think when you juxtapose that to what we ended up hiring, if you will, last cycle, you've got problems in this country, number 1 and number 2, the economy and debt and deficit.
Right.
And you've got a ticket, number 1 and number 2, who are probably the foremost experts in this area, as opposed to the current team that's in there.
So, Sean, real quickly, though, as you point out, 14 years that he's been in Washington, D.C., 8 of which was during President Bush's time. What legislatively did he accomplish?
Oh, I think he accomplished a lot. I mean, in terms of what he stood up for. At the end of the day, he's one member of Congress, but what Paul used his voice to do is to talk about what policies we needed to do. When President Bush was wrong, he was one of those voices that stood up and said so. When he was right, he said he was right. But there's no question that Paul Ryan has been a leader for fiscal responsibility and economic growth policies that have to get this country moving. So, again, I would argue that the Democrats even would admit to you that Paul has been an independent leader and reformer in Washington. And he's just the kind of person that when you add to a ticket like this, makes a very powerful combination for good.
It's certainly been a jolt. The RNC, Sean Spicer. Sean, nice to see you. Thank you, sir. And I'm going to be